Hi, welcome to ELF, Insects and Twigs in Winter. We are in Center 1, and we are in the year-long theme of cycles. So, this unit we're talking about insects and twigs, and this center specific we're talking about twigs, the physiology of twigs, the importance of twigs, and how we can identify trees, dormant trees, by their twigs and their twig patterns. So, the first thing we have, as always with our outlines, is, this is a little bit different outline than you probably have printed off, but kind of just a description of all the parts of a twig. We have buds, terminal buds, that's where the growth happens. Bud scale scars, that's where the bud had the scar that's left behind from last year's buds. Lateral buds that grow out the sides. Lenticels, which are kind of the vents where carbon dioxide and oxygen exchange places. Leaf scars, and the pith, which is the very center of this, the twig. We're not going to get into that too much, the pith, so we're going to go through all this information, and we have these handy-dandy various laminated sheets on this ring that will be in this envelope. Again, please put your materials back where you find them so that the next class can find them too. Makes it much easier. Anyways, we have twig illustrations here. That could talk about all those parts I just mentioned really quickly. The terminal bud, this is last year's growth, and you can see the bud scale scars between each section of growth. And then a leaf scar, where the leaf of a stem was attached last year. And then these lenticels, which are these little teeny tiny dots on twigs, which allow the tree to take in carbon dioxide and release oxygen. We have another diagram here. This shows parts of a twig, and again it shows the important parts, but it also shows opposite buds versus alternate buds. So on this diagram, you're going to want to point out that some are on the same fixed line and some alternate and they go down, because when we get into identifying our twigs for our games, there will be a part where it talks about opposite buds and alternate buds. Here is a whole big diagram on trees with opposite branching and alternate branching. So again, we can go through and identify trees. It talks about all the tree names. Many of these are common in Colorado. And here's some more clues for twig detectives. Remember, this center is about being a twig detective, so we're kind of going into the physiology, and then we're going to break into the hands-on part of the learning, which will be to become a twig detective. This also talks about the patterns of buds, which, if you remember when we talked about trees, kind of shows how a tree leaves, how the leaves form. So we have alternate buds, we have alternate leaving, we have alternate opposite buds, we have alternate leaves. And this just kind of shows that. So this kind of takes us back to our first unit on trees and ties it all together with our cycles for the year. This form, How to be a Twig Detective, I'll get a laminated one of these in here. These two are the same information. We have a master copy here, and you can make copies for all of your class. The PTA copier code is listed at 19540. That's in the workroom upstairs. I guess it would be south of the library. Anyways, this is the same information. This is just in a little more concise form. Again, this is a take-home the kids could take home and promote ELF and advertise. One of them will be in here as well. Let's see here, what else do we have? This is just kind of a copycat page from, I think, Ranger Rick. And it just talks about, you could identify kids. It's kind of an example to show that you can identify kids and break them down into what they are. So if you look at your class and you have a male student, does he have red, brown, or black? Red, brown, black, or blonde hair? And then you can go into these branches and you can show kind of a demonstration of how we identify twigs by identifying kids. Kind of a fun activity. And then we're back to the beginning with our twig illustration. So that's the various materials that you want to go through before you get the branches out, the twigs. And then we have two different activities. They're kind of age appropriate, and you'll just have to guess and think about your class and see what you think is the most appropriate for them. The first one is called Twin Twigs, and we recommend that for kindergarten and first graders, but maybe you want to use it for second and third, or maybe you run out of time, or you have extra time and you want to use it. Anyways, one's called Twin Twigs. I'll go through all those materials in a second. And the other one is called, what do we call it? Twig Keying, and that's for grades 2 through 4. But again, if you have very advanced kindergartners, you might want to go through this one. So what you're going to do, if you start out with the Twin Twigs game, we'll go through what we have in here. We have a key right on the cover of our envelope that talks about what trees we have. we have 12 branches in here, and maybe 13 just to make it interesting, of these kinds of trees. So we have 2 aspen branches, 2 apple, 2 ash, 2 buckeye, 2 catalpa, and 2 oak branches. And then we have these cards in the envelope. And these cards are going to be used to kind of stimulate descriptions from your kids about the twigs. What you will do for this center is you'll take your twigs out of your bag, and you'll notice that they are labeled on the bottom with little codes for our key. So you're going to put the twigs, you're going to separate them out into the 2 piles, and you're going to put them kind of behind you. It says to do it like have a half circle of your kids here, and maybe you as the teacher here, so you have your half circle all looking at you, and then you're going to have one kid turn around and give that kid a twig. And then that kid's going to try to identify and describe in detail this twig. Let's say you give them a twig F. So, as a teacher and a parent, volunteer, I'm going to look for F. I got F here. I'm going to look for F on my little cheat sheet here. And I'm going to notice, and I'm going to help the kids figure out words to describe it. Now my cheat sheet says that this twig is dark brownish green. It has small bumps, but it's smooth between the bumps. So we'll have some hand lenses in the bin that you can have the kids look at and really try to get them to describe it. Then we're going to say, well, what about the buds? And the kids are going to look at the buds, and they're going to have to distinguish between the buds and the leaf scars, because there are little stems from the leaves on here. But the buds on this one, sharp, pointy, orange-brown buds with a clustered terminal bud. So the terminal buds, remember, they're on the tips, and they're clustered together. And if you look closely, you can see, hopefully nobody will have broken those off. But again, if they have, and these twigs are not so good for you, please email us at mitchellelf@gmail.com. Anyways, the terminal buds, sorry I got off track there. Alternate buds, the terminal buds are clustered, and then the other buds are alternate. They're not opposite. So that gives us a little bit of identification help. And then finally, the leaf scar, which is where the leaves were last year, in fact there's still some stems on there, is raised with a crescent shape. Now I don't know if a kindergartner will get into that kind of detail, but this, after they kind of describe it and the kids try and figure it out, then you can read these descriptions. So you have your one kid here with his back turned with one twig trying to describe it, and the other kids are looking at the other examples, and they're going to try to match F with what F they see here in front of them. So you'll have all the other 6 branches sitting here and the keys back here and the kid facing that way. It's kind of complicated to try to explain, but once you work it through in your head, I'm sure you'll figure it out. And if you got questions, you can ask us. So the objective of this game specifically is to kind of get them to observe in detail twigs and to help identify and let them know that even though they see a dormant tree, and we learn to identify trees in the fall with their leaves, you can also identify a dormant tree in the winter by its twigs, buds, and physiology that way. So that's for the K through 1. Again, you can use that for any age kids that you think it's appropriate. And again, if you run out of time with the older kids, you can use this activity to see if they can figure out how to match them up. The next thing we have is the twig keying game. And the materials provided for that is 1 color-coded twig key, and then 7 twig keys with identification. So what you're going to do is you're going to take a twig out of the bag, and then we'll have 6 or 7 in here. And it, again, is color-coded with a little code. Here's a couple examples. Can you see with that manual zooming? And those match the colors on here. You do not want to show the kids this. Do not show them. Okay, so you got your twigs, and you can lay these out in front of the kids. They can see all of them at one time, and they're going to touch them and look at them and feel them. And then you're going to give each child one of these. This is a twig key, not to be confused with this key, and this is how we identify our twigs. So you'll take a twig, and you'll go through this very simple checklist. My twig has no leaves. Well, or my twig has evergreen needles. I'm going to start with this twig and take the leaves off of that twig later. Okay, my twig has no leaves. Go to step 2. My twig has leaf scars and buds that are opposing, or my twig has leaf scars and buds that are alternating. Let's look at this. Well, this one appears to be alternating. So I'm going to follow along. It says go to step 4. My twig has no spines or thorns. my twig has spines or thorns. So this one has spines or thorns, so it is a hawthorn. And so I'm going to make a note of that, and we've identified correctly that our twig with the green key is a hawthorn. So you'll go through that with all the sticks. I still have to get to a greenhouse and get some more, and you can go through and just identify each twig by these vocabulary words, and it will help the kids to, again, same as in the Twin Twigs game, this will show kids that you can identify a tree in the winter by its twigs and buds and patterns that are on there, and the texture of the bark, etc., etc. So that concludes Center 1 for ELF, leaves in, let's see, twigs and insects in the winter. This one didn't get much into the insects, but it does talk about the twigs. And other centers further along will definitely talk about the insects and their symbiotic relationship with twigs in the winter. If you've got any questions, or if we're running low on supplies, if you notice our branches aren't up to par anymore, please give us an email at mitchellelf@gmail.com.